competency-based. Thank you. Welcome to the CBVE Town Hall meeting. So my name's Jenny Hodgson, and I'm the co-chair of AAVMC's Council for Outcomes-Based Veterinary Education, or COVE. And this council has oversight of our ongoing efforts to help introduce competency-based veterinary education to veterinary programs in all the AAVMC affiliated colleges and schools. And we're helping this process by our 3 working groups, which are Advocate, Analyse and Catalyse. And it's this last working group, the Catalyse working group, that I'd really like to acknowledge as having done the lion's share of getting this town hall meeting planned and organised. So a huge thank you to this group. I'd also like to thank and acknowledge AAVMC's ongoing support of COVE, and to welcome Ted Mishima and Lisa Greenhill to this meeting from AAVMC. Before I leave this slide, I'd like to let everyone know that we're recording this meeting, which I think you've just heard, and also be posted to cbve.org so you can watch it again. Also to remind you to put your name and affiliation in the chat so that we can follow up with you after the meeting. So next slide, Kristen, please. So during our town hall meeting today, we like to do more listening than talking. So we are interested in hearing your stories about implementing CBVE and particularly how we can help you in this process. So we're going to start out the meeting today by sharing with you a brief summary of the results of our recent survey of colleges and schools. And then we're going to spend the bulk of the meeting in breakout rooms discussing some questions we have on implementation of CBVE. And for this, we're going to be using Google Docs so that we can capture all your thoughts and ideas, and also so that we can share these ideas with others in the meeting, not just those of you in the breakout rooms. At the end of the town hall meeting, we plan to get back together for a brief synopsis of the common ideas and conclusions that were discussed in the breakout sessions. And we'll also be summarising these and sending them out to the participants in the town hall meeting. Our hopes are really that this input will provide us with a really valuable information that we need for future endeavours of our working groups, as well as also future town hall meetings that we're planning. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Kristen Cheney, who's my co-chair, who will start our discussion of the CBVE survey. So, Kristen.
Thanks, Jenny. And thanks everyone again for being here. One of the main agenda items is to share the results from this CBVE implementation survey. We deployed this survey several weeks ago through the Academic Affairs Committee of AAVMC, and we were thrilled with the results. We had 34 respondents, so that means 35 respondents from across the world, really. And we have this great map. We were missing our friends from south of the equator, but you can see we had a variety of schools from the US, from Canada. We had some represented from the Caribbean. My apologies to the UK contingent. There were a couple of schools there, and you're out in the ocean because we didn't have a map that your island's too small. We also had Utrecht represented, and then over in East Asia, we actually had the school from Hong Kong represented. So we were thrilled with the respondents.
How were they, the people?
We got some great information, and we will, through the next few slides, report that information to you as it was reported to us. So I'm going to turn it over now to Kathy.
There she is. Thanks, Kristen. Unmuting. You'd think after a year and a quarter of Zoom that it would be automatic. So one of the first questions we asked on the survey was, are you using a competency-based framework? And of the 35 schools that responded, 20 said yes, they were using a competency-based framework, and half of those, or 10, said they're currently using CBVE. The other 10 were using a variety of frameworks. Now, you just saw the map with the UK schools, so they were using the RCVS Day 1 competencies. Some schools were using competency frameworks that they developed for their own school. So it's a variety of other competency frameworks that accounted for the other half of the 20 that are using a competency framework. Then we also asked, if you're not using a competency framework, do you intend to use one, to use CBVE specifically in the next 3 years? And 12 schools said that they intended to implement CBVE in the next 3 years. There were several comments that, well, we're not sure we're going to do all parts of CBVE, but we're going to be implementing it over the next 3 years and at least get parts of it implemented. Next slide, please. So we asked about how are you integrating CBVE into the curriculum, and about half are revising their curriculum and incorporating CBVE while they're revising their curriculum, out of the 11 that responded to this question. And the other half are superimposing CBVE over their current curriculum without a major curriculum revision. There were a mix of implementation strategies that were indicated. Some are starting with the 4th year and going backwards. Some are starting with the 1st year and going forwards. Some are doing a mix of that, or some are doing the whole thing all at once. And 8 schools said they were implementing CBVE in the preclinical curriculum and 6 in the clinical curriculum. Next slide. So we asked about the level of support for implementing CBVE, and this table stratifies it according to the different audiences. So the faculty, the students, and the administration. And we had people rated as low support, moderate, or high, or maybe they were unsure. So for the 8 schools that evaluated faculty support, moderate was the most common rating that was selected. Most faculty, they thought, moderately supported it. Students were distributed a little bit more across the different responses, with about 3 schools saying that they had high support by the students, 3 moderate, 1 low, and then 2 were unsure. And then interestingly, administrative support for all 9 schools that answered this question said that it was high. Next slide, thank you. So then we asked about mapping their curriculum to CBVE, and 8 of the 9 programs that answered this said they were mapping their program to CBVE. 8 were doing it in the preclinical curriculum, and then 6 of the 8 were doing it in the clinical curriculum. Next slide. So one of the concerns that has been raised regarding adopting the CBVE framework is, how is this going to impact us with accreditation? And the AVMA Council on Education did put out a letter over the last years that said that if you map to the AVMA, if you map to the AVMC CBVE framework, that was acceptable as long as it was clear how that correlated with the AVMA clinical competencies, and the clinical competencies needed to all be represented. So this chart shows the first 5 domains, and you can go back for a minute, Kristen. So the first 5 domains, and you can see on the right-hand column are the COE 9 clinical competencies listed by number, and then which of these domains that they map to for CBVE. And all 8 of the 9 are shown on this particular slide in the first 5 domains. And then if we go to the next slide, this has domains 5 through 9. And you'll see here we add the 9th clinical competency. So now all 9 of the AVMA clinical competencies are represented by the CBVE framework, but there's 2 CBVE domains that are not represented in the COE clinical competencies, and those are the ones with red: collaboration and financial and practice management. And so the CBVE framework is more comprehensive for what DVM graduates do than the COE 9. But all the COE 9 clinical competencies are incorporated in the CBVE framework. So now I'm going to turn it over to Jared.
Thanks, Kathy. So the figures that you're looking at here helped us to, or where our schools reported regarding where they implemented CBVE in terms of whether it was preclinical, clinical, or both clinical and preclinical. And we asked about each of the elements of CBVE, the competency framework, which is that kind of top left circle, and that's the 9 areas of or domains of competence. EPAs, which is a reminder, are entrustable professional activities. These are actually workplace-based activities that sort of incorporate a whole number of competencies in each of them, things like developing a diagnostic plan and interpreting results. And then milestones are actually a way of showing, our way of trying to describe progress along that path from sort of a novice state to a proficient state. So you can see that in terms of those resources, the competencies themselves were used most in preclinical and both clinical and preclinical. So the competencies for the schools using them seem to be the tool that were most applicable across areas of instruction. As you go down to the entrustable professional activities, you start to see clinical in there, some preclinical mixed with clinical, and a little bit of preclinical itself. And then a number of schools saying that that was not applicable for them. And by the time we get to the milestones, it sort of characterize that progression from novice to proficient that was used exclusively in clinical instruction by those who were using it. So what that suggests to us, part of it's just that EPAs and milestones are more tied to that workplace-based environment, and also that there might be opportunities for us to establish the connections between those EPAs and milestones and what's happening preclinically. And I will go ahead and move it to Susan, I think.
Yes, thanks, Jared. We asked the respondents which methods they used to make student progress decisions, and unsurprisingly, everyone used rotation grades. You can see that down the bottom, 81% in both preclinical and clinical, and 20% in preclinical only. Then we have objective structured clinical exams being used by 80% of the respondents. And of those, 50% used it in the preclinical environment and 23 used it in both. Then the other methods were not used as commonly. You can see that capstone exams and portfolios were used by about 30% of respondents. And of those, most used them in both preclinical and clinical contexts. And then competency committees and having a capstone experience were used only by a handful of respondents. So talking about the use of programmatic assessment, what is programmatic assessment? How do we define it? Now, this definition is Van der Vleuten, published in 2018, and it's an intentionally designed assessment system, formative and summative, in which the longitudinal development of learning is visible to the student as actionable feedback, and which provides rich data for informed holistic decision-making on progress. And so we gave this definition in the survey and asked respondents as to which parts of their curriculum they used programmatic assessment in and what did they do. So if we look at how it was used in the clinical years, the respondents reported using it for mid-block feedback, formative and summative assessments, and feedback from work-placed assessments in general, including the mini CEX, activity logs, and MCQs. And then across all program years, outcomes and portfolio assessments, including DOPS and OSCEs, were used to contribute to programmatic assessment, and access to gradebook scores for the students, which were linked to competencies so they could see their progress. And then dashboards, tagging exam keywords, faculty input, and having a holistic committee to review student progress. When we look at training stakeholders, we had about 4 out of 5 respondents said that they had already trained faculty, and about a third had trained staff, and only 1 in 5 had provided training to students so far on CBVE. We asked an open-ended survey question on challenges to implementation of CBVE that the respondents saw. And the one we've got at the top of the list there is change and change management. So that was about shifting ideas surrounding clinical assessment and the management of clinical students, needing to facilitate buy-in for CBVE, and looking at the long haul. So having faculty believe that this change will be long-lasting. Then resources were about time and effort and faculty development needs. So the need for learning about CBVE and the interest in CBVE. And part of this also is the pandemic. So people are coming out of the pandemic feeling quite worn out, And the comment was that it's hard to ask faculty to do more in this context, and particularly our clinicians have increased caseload and reduced time due to that. Then faculty reception is about faculty resistance, which could be linked to those circumstances. So that's part of it. And then also understanding what CBVE is and understanding that the basic science content is integrated within the framework. So questioning where is my content, for example, asking questions about when is the right time to introduce CBVE, and thinking that the framework is too much focused on technical skills and not enough on knowledge. So again, those are concerns that faculty who don't know CBVE well might have as they look at implementation. And then pedagogy, so shifting that perspective to the outcomes-based education, and then looking at programmatic assessment, as we have already mentioned. So what we're going to do now is, now that we've presented the results of the survey to you very quickly, we're going to ask you to move into breakout groups. And Kristen, we're looking at your desktop right now, just to let you know. And when we ask you to move into breakout groups, these are independent groups, and we're going to be asking you to work together and add your responses into the Google Doc about how to address challenges in CBVE implementation. Now, we're taking a risk in asking everyone to do this independently and type into the Google Doc, because if you type over someone else, we will only get one set of responses. So we have an instruction sheet which Kristen might be able to link to, but I will go through it in case. So we have, we're going to divide you into breakout rooms, and we're going to give you two links. One is an instruction sheet, and one is the question sheet with two questions on it. We've got two main questions we want to ask. It's important that you write down your breakout room number.
I got online for this thing.
It's important you write down your breakout room number when you receive the invitation, because that will tell you where in the Google Sheet to start adding your responses under that breakout room number. And then you will be able to join your breakout room, meet 6 to 8 new colleagues or maybe old friends, and then start responding to the questions that are written in the Google Sheet. You may or may not have a Cove member in your room. Generally, we will be just popping in and out to see how you're going and see if you have any questions for us. But what we'll be doing in the background is looking at what you're typing into the Google Sheet. And we're going to be synthesizing that. Kathy and Jared will be in particular synthesizing that, so that once we finish the breakout rooms, we will actually give you a synthesis of what everyone has said. And this is how we'll be sharing everyone's suggestions across everyone that's on this meeting, rather than just the people in a small breakout room or just those who get the chance to feedback. So key points: make sure you download the documents that are in the chat, follow the instructions, and don't type over anyone else, please, because we want to know your thoughts and we want to be able to synthesize those at the end of the meeting for you. So Kristen is going to allocate people to breakout rooms once we have our documents in the chat, which I can see are there. One thing we haven't shown you yet is the questions. So 2 questions. What does your program envisage as the biggest hurdle or barrier to implementation? So we ask for your successes in addressing that and frustrations you've experienced. And then second question, how can the AAVMC Council on Outcomes-Based Education best support your needs for implementing and moving to this new model of education? So we hope you enjoy your small groups in the breakout rooms, and we look forward to seeing you back in about 30 minutes.
So what we've tried to do is As you were typing in all your wonderful ideas, we were trying to scan through them and look for themes and common things. So Kristen, you can, there you go. So this is some of the barriers and hurdles, and there were a lot of common themes in the barriers. Changing faculty mindset, shifting from a focus on disciplines to a focus on competencies, trying to simplify CBVE for faculty so that they can understand it, because it's kind of complex when you first get exposed to it. Another area that I saw several comments on were generating motivation for change, especially after the pandemic. There's a lack of bandwidth. People are really tired. People have been working really hard, and we need proof. Some, you know, why is this important to do? Why should we put all this energy into this change? Is there proof that it's better than what we've always been doing? Basic science faculty were mentioned several times, that it's a little bit harder for them to see where their disciplines fit in. And there was also mention, and I'm not going through obviously in the exact order I have it typed up here, but there was mention about less detail in our CBVE documents for the basic science portion of the curriculum. And so it sounded like there was some desire to have more mapping of competencies and milestones into the basic science curriculum, as opposed to more of a clinical focus like the EPAs have. Buy-in by faculty was mentioned many, many times, that we need to have them to see this as important. That goes along with motivation for change. And then faculty time, lack of bandwidth, I mentioned that. Envisioning the how-to part, so people can understand kind of the concepts, you know, what are milestones, what are EPAs, why are we doing this, but then how do we actually go about implementing it? And there were several comments about mapping too, that mapping can be difficult and tedious and very time consuming, and maybe some help on mapping. There were some comments about some help from specialists or experts to help do some of these things. And then the logistics of implementation, and specifically one of the things mentioned was having like a digital platform to be able to document all these things like EPA's milestones, how the students are accomplishing them. And then there were several comments about assessment as well, and changing our assessments to match the competency focus of the curriculum. So I'm going to turn it over to Jared. Is that okay?
Muted. Okay, so as you might imagine, the ideas for what we could do are kind of the other side of the coin of the challenges. And I tried to sort of, this was quick and dirty analysis, so the number off to the right sort of gives an idea of magnitude of how much I saw those ideas as I went through the comments. And we'll have more precision later on, but there was a lot of groups had said that there needs to be more opportunities for sharing across each other, faculty development and training. So basically sharing best practices, what is working well for programs, how they could share that, just down to various ideas of providing training from both from our group centrally, the Cove group centrally, and inter-institutional. I saw at least 4 people who, and Kathy just mentioned this, but mentioned it'd be helpful to have some kind of common software that we could use that would make it really easy to track student progress as they move through, and make it easy to do the programmatic assessment that was discussed earlier. And then, I had this actually broken out separately. So one was training, the other was examples from institutions that have successfully implemented. And then a number of people, this came up in the challenges, but helping people to find themselves in the preclinical area. So one suggestion was preclinical milestones. Another was a framework for mapping the CBVE back to the basic sciences. And then the idea of not just a standardized software tracking system, but some kind of standardized assessment, so that we can all be doing something similar, hopefully with validated assessments that we could then share and benchmark across schools. Someone suggested that we need some good data about how things are working right now internationally, how it's working across the world, and who's using it. And then this one at the third from the bottom is really kind of similar to that number 2 up there, is how we can transition really yeah, not quite the same, how we can transition to what we're doing to CBVE. And then finally, the really help for interpreting results. So how to look at and make sense of the data that comes in. So that's what I captured. Thanks, Kristen. We'll jump back to you.
And we'll go through these more carefully and try and make sure we catch everything, because I know I didn't catch everything in the hurdles.
Yeah, I
Thank
didn't
you.
either.
Thank you so much, Kathy and Jared. That's a tough task to do on the fly like that. So I know that was really beneficial for everyone, and we will summarize these things and get them back to you. I'm going to turn this back over to Jenny now for our wrap up. Jenny.
Yeah, thanks, Kristen, and another thanks absolutely to Kathy and Jared. Did a fantastic job of trying to quickly get together all those ideas, and because there was a lot of people present at the meeting today, so we're absolutely delighted with the number of people who could join us and who've provided us with some really valuable input into how CBVE is going for them in their various institutions, but also to some fantastic ideas for how we should be taking CBVE forward and how we can best support you in helping to implement CBVE. So that's been really helpful. And so, yeah, just to remind you is that we'll be sending out to you the links to this Zoom meeting, so you can watch the Zoom meeting again. But we will definitely be also sending out to all the people who we've captured the chat and have everybody's names and affiliations, and can send out to you also to you know, when we summarize or not summarize, when we get together all of the ideas that you guys have shared today, and we'll organize it and sort it and then send it out to you so that you've got a more full appreciation of all the discussions that we've done today. So that's been really helpful. And I know I really found it really helpful myself, just hearing all those thoughts, as well as the thoughts of the group that I was with. So that was really interesting. And what we're going to be doing is trying to, we'll get back together again, we'll get back together again and really look at all that information and that input that we've received, and really think about how can we best then format our next town hall meeting. So the town hall meetings are really about giving us opportunities to hear feedback and to hear from you and to hear what it is that we could be doing, and then jumping off on those town hall meetings as to how can then we best support you in implementing CBVE. And when we heard a lot about, you know, having some more meetings and some more sessions with various people and workshops so that people can do that. So that was certainly one of the things that we could hear. But with these town hall meetings, we really want to focus them on hearing from you and hearing your ideas. So, but based on the feedback that you gave us today, that's how we'll focus that next town hall meeting for August the 5th. So I think that really sort of summarizes. Kristen, you can. Was there anything else that you wanted to say? Other than, again, it was great to see so many people, and also to what I thought was fantastic to see so many new names and faces, and how much interest there is out there for CBVE, and how we can all work together for implementing CBVE in our colleges and schools.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what Jenny said, the breadth of the folks that showed up today, lots of new faces and names, we're thrilled. And it really is the goal of this council to help support you. And honestly, our mission is to be able to move forward and create opportunities to help our programs that are within the AAVMC, and using the information that you provided today is a really great springboard for us. So we will be back in touch, and we look forward to having everybody with us in August again, and we'll be sending out, just as we did this time as we draw closer, information on the agenda for that second session of our summer town hall series. So thanks again, everyone, from all of us on the council, and for those on the CBVE working groups that also joined us today. We're just so thankful you're here.